What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Prodigious Customs YouTube channel. I'm Jason Stoltz, and today we're busting out the magic sauce and gonna fix some failing clear coat. Actually, there is no real way to fix it. You have to sand it off and fix it properly. So I want to show you how to do that in today's episode. As you can see, the sun has kind of baked this off. You can literally just flake off any of the clear coat that's kind of still on here. And some people, oh, you could just clear over the top of that and you'd never see it. Well, you're gonna see all these lines still in it. Oh, get a razor blade and flake all this stuff off and you can re-clear. Well, this color is gonna be completely different than this one because clear coat acts as a UV protector. What does that mean? It means your paint won't fade. Your metallics will stay brilliant. And essentially, you'll have a nice color that lasts forever. But as soon as you lose that UV protection, you get this flat, chalky, nasty looking color, and you no longer have that protection. You no longer have that color. So, I noticed that there's a couple of places where the color or the primer beneath it has failed, so that there is rust kind of popping through. There's also these little bubbles. Well, anywhere you kind of have a little bit of a bubble or it looks like it's dirty, as in like sand underneath the color, that's rust. You need to get all the way down to your bare metal and sand that off. So, with that said, we first want to mask this car up. We don't want dirt getting in the inside. When we go to spray, we don't want overspray on the other side of the car that we're not going to paint. You don't want any scratches from your sanding to go into your roof or into your glass, so you need to make sure you mask all that off, protect all the surfaces that you don't want to get sanded or to get painted. All right, let's jump into it. Grab your favorite kind of masking tape. This one just so happens to be my favorite. It sticks really good, but we're gonna go ahead and protect anything we don't want our DA to touch or to scratch to cause us problems later. So with that, also take off everything that you can take off to get out of the way. For example, I'm gonna pull this mirror off, this scraper off. I believe this molding comes off fairly easy, as well as the wing is gonna come off. It has failing clear coat along with the deck lid. And I'll end up painting this whole side of the car, blending into the hood, painting that fender, and blending into the hood. So basically I'm painting everything other than that door and that quarter in the roof. Problem is that fender's really smashed. I might end up painting into the door, and in that case, could end up painting the whole thing. But I'm just trying to keep it on the cheap and get this car done and finished and make it look good. So for now, I'm gonna focus on getting rid of the failing clear coat. If you open the car door, you look in your jamb, sometimes you can tell if a quarter's been replaced based on the welds. Factory, they have a really tight pinch weld with spot welds in it. They're just a perfect little circle. Whereas if somebody's replaced them, you can either see grinder marks or it's perfectly smooth. It shouldn't be perfectly smooth because it had to be seamed together at one point in its life. At that point, you know it's been bodyworked, it's been replaced. So I can tell that they painted this door, the quarter, because the quarter comes all the way up to here, and the deck lid and wing. So this car was apparently in some gnarly accident at some point. I don't know. I bought the car in worse shape than this. It had fiberglass front fenders and it was never really right. I mean, I found that out just by taking different things apart. They obviously had a booming stereo or some sort of fancy deck to cut up the dash like they did. And yeah, so I'm just trying to make it right and get everything happy again to look aesthetically pleasing, and go ahead and send this down the road, let somebody else enjoy it, because I got a lot more projects and a lot more cool content to bring in that I'm a lot more excited about than this plain Jane run-of-the-mill boring car. I want to get into my hot rods and teach you how to build a show car, teach you how to gap things, to teach you how to block things properly to get it show car worthy, and like the really cool stuff, the stuff I do at work every day. Yes, I love my job and it makes it easy to come home and do it when it's your projects. At work, it's easy because you're getting paid to do it, but when you come home, sometimes you lack that motivation. I want to help you get back out in the garage and get excited about getting your project moving, because a lot of times the body budget is what eats up the whole thing. You know, mechanical's cheap in the idea of, oh crap, I have to paint this car. Well, good luck finding a decent paint job for under 20 grand. Just the way the world is. So, unless you want to get a cheap paint job, I'm not, you know, shying away from that. If that's your thing, go for it. If not, take the pride, make it look nice. So, with that said, let's go ahead and get the mirror pulled off, scrapers pulled off. We'll get this edge masked up, protected, and start rolling, baby. All right, I know what you're thinking. Why take this off if I can't take this off? Well, if I could take this off, I would. This just gives me a good breaking point and it allows the paint to roll under in a less noticeable area. It gives me a better paint edge. Whereas this, I'm just gonna have to tape up right to that edge and let the paint and clear flow in there as best as it can. And then on the back, you may have noticed I left the latch assembly and in the door. Well, I still want to be able to drive this to the paint booth if I have to. Alrighty, so as you can see, here's the rust poking through. But you come up here and I've popped the top of these kind of bumps just to prove to you that anything that's got this rough, even no matter how fine the texture is, it's most likely got rust underneath it. So I'm gonna go ahead and strip this all the way back down to bare metal. I'm gonna use 180 grit so that I can throw some epoxy primer on it and just get all the rust off of it. There's also some that I'm gonna dive into right here on this edge. You can see, I'm not sure if this is clear or not. So I'm just gonna dive into it and I might start with like 320 on this area just because I'm not sure if I'm just prepping it to throw some primer on it or if I need to take it all the way down. If I do, then I'm gonna step it back up and go coarser to 180. It's always a good idea, go ahead and throw a mask on. You don't need to be eating this crap. So don't destroy your lungs, don't give yourself the cancer. Let's get into this. Oh! Check it out, we're hitting some mud. So this is Bondo. Not sure why it's there, but as you can see, I still got a little bit more to do here. So this pitting and stuff, you want to get it away. You want to keep your DA as flat as you can, as to not make any waviness, any weird situations. I'm trying to chase this back. So think of this stuff like rings on a tree. The farther apart they are, the better it's going to come out. So when you go to prime it, the easier this is going to flow out. It's less likely to come back. It's going to... Sometimes you can see these, and I like to call them cow pies. So if you try to keep your repair too small, well, this layer is going to shrink differently from this. Your new layer on top of your bare metal is going to shrink differently. So you end up what's called a cow pie, for me anyway, and it rings up and you can see it. You can see that it's a bad repair. So don't do that. Make these each individual layers as far apart as you possibly can. So let's keep going. Back here, those bumps were, but these are sanding out just fine. And there's no rust in the metal underneath. Listen more to what I say than what I do. You don't really want to be touching your bare metal. There's oils on your hands, moisture. It's gonna help promote rust. So if you can, wear gloves, and then as soon as you're done sanding this, you definitely want to get it sealed up. I don't care if it's a rattle can, a little bit of etch that you sand off right before you prime it, or whatever it is. Don't let your bare metal parts sit out open, or else they have the potential to just rust up again. I'm not sure why they have mud up in this quarter, but like I said, I'm pretty sure this uniside got replaced at one point in time, so maybe there was something funky in the stamp. And I'm trying to fix it. As you can see, as I'm going along, the clear sand's completely different than the base and even the primer underneath there. So you're gonna end up with high spots. So you gotta be very careful, use a sharp enough grit, keep your paper sharp, in order to make sure that you're cutting it flat. Alrighty, so I jumped down to 80 grit because this is kind of starting to feel a little bit uneven and I don't want that. I can always put a block on it, but you definitely want to cut the clear back to the point that you can no longer, either with your air blower or with your fingernail, get under this layer and keep pushing it off. If you can keep pushing it off, you need to keep chasing it back until it's stuck. Because if you go ahead and paint over that, the solvents could release it and you can have an absolute disaster of a paint job happen as things just start peeling away, flaking off. Or maybe it's a month later, it's sitting out in the sun and you see problems underneath. It's starting to flake off underneath. You need to get every bit of this flakiness off, or else it's gonna cause you a headache down the road. So if you have to, like I did, just jump down to a coarser grit. The trickiest part's gonna be getting it to go around this corner. So you're just gonna have to sand it by hand with the edge of a piece of sandpaper and just sand into that corner the best you can. That way, when you put your new layers of paint on there, it really locks it down. So beware of that, and don't forget to get all your edges. So what I'm looking for as I'm sanding is it to start sanding back evenly. If I still have this shiny layer, that means the clear is still chipping off. See how I could take my fingernail? Bam, there's no clear there. It's just straight down to the base. You don't want that. You want this to all sand evenly. So I'm thinking I'm pretty much gonna take the whole upper lip of this quarter off, as well as the door, just to get rid of any flaking paint. I did, in this repair, find a high spot. So they did have something going on. You can see the grinder marks. This is DA out here. And then you can see my high that lit up right here, and you can feel it with your hand. So we're gonna have to do a little bit of body work there to get that back out. We'll see how much of it blocks out, but I'm kind of doubting just by the way it feels that I won't be able to just block it out. So I'll get this stripped and we'll come back. Alrighty, so we're back. It's all sanded. I've gone around all the corners with 180 just to blend it out, to get everything roughed up for the primer to stick to. Now we need to prep where we're gonna prime to. We're gonna take 320 and go around and soften all of our edges. Now where to break the primer though, because you don't want to just stop primer right in the middle of a panel and end up with a line that you see later. So it's always best to either take it into a corner. For example, up here, I didn't sand this pinch weld, but I can break the line right up in here, to take it all the way to the end of a panel, so the end of your door, all the way up, or into a reverse curve, or somewhere that when you're blocking, you're gonna grind that line that you might possibly have out. It's always best when spraying primer to not spray all the way up to your tape, to leave a soft edge to sand back to. But if you do have a hard line, put it in a place where you're gonna be able to block right through that thing and feather it out so you can't see it when you go to paint it. So I'm gonna go ahead and sand down into here with 320. We'll back mask it and we'll throw a body bag on here and mix up some primer and get this thing in primer so that we can start blocking it. Always, always, always make sure your panels are clean before sanding them. I didn't show it, but I did wipe down the car, and I will wipe it down before we go ahead and spray primer. So just for repetitive sake, I'm gonna try and break the primer. I'm gonna take it all the way to here, to this edge, so that I can sand off of this edge, and all of this will be primed. Does it need it all? No, but I'm not planning on putting heavy coats back here. Just where the just where the clear coat had an issue. So I'll prime heavier up here along this edge, and this will just get pretty much dusted. It's not gonna get a heavy amount of primer. Whereas all of my bare metal, I'm gonna especially make sure it's clean, wipe it all down, get it to where it needs to be, and put a few coats on there so I have material to block with. Always, always, always make sure your panels are clean, especially before sanding, and especially before putting primer or top coats on it. you don't want demons coming back up from underneath. Make sure the panel is clean, rust free, and you shouldn't have any issues. So let's get to sanding this with 320 and the side of the car, and then we'll mask it up for some primer. Alrighty, now one of the last things I like to do is go over all my edges, any area, with a Scotch-Brite. With Scotch-Brite, you can go ahead and even clear over the top of it later. It's not going to affect it. As long as you're not pushing into the panel, gouging it, it'll be just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of this kind of just Scotch-Brited down around my corners farther than I took the sandpaper. And then we'll be ready to mask this up for primer. Alrighty, so pulled all the masking tape off so we can really clean the car. That's the last thing you want. I know it's not paint, so it's not as vital as some people might say, but I like a good clean quality job. So now I'm going to take my wax and grease remover, wipe the whole car down on this side where I'm going to be painting, plus the surfaces near it so that my tape will stick. I don't have to worry about, as I'm spraying, that my tape's lifting up. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that done, and then we'll get into masking this pig. Alrighty, so as you saw, when you're cleaning the car, you want to think of it like using toilet paper. It's a crazy analogy, but think about it. One direction, you're wiping it to take the grease from this section and get it completely off the panel. You want to go end of panel to end of panel. So don't sit there and smear it around and create problems. Clean it off, get it clean. You want to have a nice clean panel, something that paint's going to stick to and you're not going to have contamination. Also wash your rags, and if there's anything that comes up on them, keep cleaning that section until your rag stays completely white or whatever color it is. There shouldn't be any dark spots or anything like that. So make sure your rag's clean. Constantly use different sections of the rag so that if there is a contaminant, you're not taking it from this panel to this panel, and so on. So let's get into masking this thing. When masking for primer, you want to do what's called over masking. So for example, the edge of this black trim, I want to make sure the tape is over it and onto the painted surface just a little bit. You don't want to have it floating to the point that your primer is going to land on that black edge, and you're going to see that later. So you want to just barely over mask it. Now that's different for paint. You want to barely under mask it, which is to leave that little bit of an edge showing, maybe just barely, so that if any paint gets on it, it's not a big deal. You know that you got paint all the way into the corner. You're not going to see a tape line on your panel. So let's mask this bad boy up and get to spraying some primer. Alrighty, so we're officially all masked up. We're ready to throw a bag on it. If you've noticed, I've kind of what's called back masked every edge. And that is to keep a softer edge, something to sand away easier. It can create a hard edge still if you turn your gun and you actually spray against it, but I don't plan to. I plan to just stay along the face because there's nothing wrong with the edges. I just want to get the face. This technique will also help me to put my plastic on there, or if you're doing paper, it gives you somewhere to stick it to, razor blade it off, and keep moving forward. I'm going to use plastic, cover the whole car, and just cut out what I need cut out. So, it's always important to think about how to mask the car. I got ahead of myself a couple of times, especially right here. I was like, oh, I'll go ahead and get this easy spot. Well, I forgot to get the back edge of the door, so I had to go ahead and rip that off, do this section, and then put it back in. It's always good to have something like either the back edge of your razor blade, a screwdriver, a bone, whatever, a plastic bone, be able to roll your tape in so you still have that soft edge. You don't have a hard tape edge. So you can push on the edges, roll it in until it's a soft edge. I'll go ahead and get the plastic thrown on here, We'll get our epoxy mixed up. Since I have so much bare metal, I don't want to go with just a surfacer. I will come back with surfacer and fix some areas like there's a ding in the door right here, as well as one right here behind the fuel tank I'm going to go ahead and take care of, as well as any chips or whatever. I can just spot those in. Right now I'm just focused on getting this panel locked down. No more flaking clear, the bare metal's clean. Get it locked down with something that sticks to it, something that's made for it. So, let's get into it.
Here we go.
Alrighty, so that's it. We want to keep things nice and tight, together, looking good. The better it looks, the better your outcome's gonna be. So, go around it, make sure your tape's not pulling away anywhere. You can kind of just double check, rub everything down, make sure it's stuck. I'm gonna go ahead and clean it one more time since, you know, I've been using my hands. Get everything ready. If I see any shiny spots, I'll go ahead and hit them with a Scotch-Brite, clean them really good, and then we're ready to start spraying. Alrighty, so we're ready to spray this thing. I'm gonna focus on my bare metal spots first, kind of get them flowed in. And anywhere that there is kind of stuff like this, just to get a build on it. That way when I go to block it, it's going to block out easier. It's not going to have a low spot and I'm going to have to keep sanding there until I get it going. If I put a couple coats over the top of it, when I go to block it with everything else, it'll flow out. So watch for that. Let's get to spraying, baby. Check it out, everybody. We're back to being what looks like one color. It's really just epoxy, so we still have to pay for paint and all that good stuff, but it's looking good. Everything is locked down. There's no more flaking clear. There's no more issues. We have a good substrate to block for paint and to have good peace of mind. So watch for on the next episode. I want to show you how to fix some dents. So this was just for flaking clear. I'll show you how to fix a couple dents, how to spot prime them in, and depending how it goes, we might prep the rest of the body for paint. The door, the quarter, the deck lid, the wing, front fenders, and the hood. And we might get to spraying it, or I might save it for an episode. I haven't decided yet, but I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informational, if nothing else. And I hope that you have a great freaking day, and I appreciate the heck out of you. Keep watching the videos, and I'll see you on the next one.